From the day we were born, people said my twin and I were impossible to tell apart. Same almond-shaped eyes, same quick smile, even the same habit of tilting our heads when we listened. But beyond the surface, there was something more, an invisible thread that tied us together tighter than most siblings I'd ever known. We grew up in the same small neighborhood, sharing not just a house, but a life. Birthdays were joint affairs. Report cards were compared side by side. When one of us got into trouble, the other was always there, offering a quick excuse or a distracting joke to ease the scolding. Friends came and went, but we were constant. From the outside, it looked simple, two halves of the same whole. Inside, it was more complicated. I noticed early on that my emotions toward my twin weren't always the same as they were toward others in my family. There was a pull, an instinct to protect, to notice the smallest changes. If they seemed upset, I felt a knot form in my stomach before they even spoke. In high school, that connection only grew sharper. We chose the same electives without even discussing it. We'd finish each other's sentences, often to the groans of our classmates. When group projects were assigned, teachers didn't bother splitting us up. We were a unit. But sometimes, in moments I barely admitted to myself, I felt something shift. It was in the way my chest tightened when they laughed with someone else for too long, or how I caught myself memorizing little details, like the faint scar above their eyebrow or the way sunlight caught in their hair. It was nothing, I told myself. Just twin stuff. That's what I called it when my mind wandered into places I didn't understand. One winter afternoon, something happened that unsettled me. I'd been sitting on the porch, reading, when my twin came home from school. Their cheeks were flushed from the cold, and their eyes lit up when they saw me. Without hesitation, they dropped their backpack and pulled me into a hug, holding on just a little longer than usual. My heart raced, not from surprise, but from the warmth that spread through me. It was over in seconds. They laughed, teased me about looking serious, and went inside. I stayed there, staring at the frost on the railing, wondering why that moment felt different. Why my hands were still tingling. Over the next weeks, I noticed more of those moments, small, fleeting, but impossible to forget. I didn't talk about it with anyone, not even them. Instead, I tucked it away in the quiet corners of my mind, hoping it would fade. It didn't. And though I didn't know it then, that unspoken shift between us was the start of something I couldn't stop and wouldn't be able to take back. The change between us wasn't sudden. It was gradual, like a slow tide creeping higher on the shore. We still laughed at the same inside jokes, still fought over the last piece of toast, still sat shoulder to shoulder during movie nights. But beneath those ordinary moments, there was a new awareness, a quiet electricity neither of us acknowledged out loud. One evening, we were sprawled on the living room floor, working on a shared art project for school. The television murmured in the background, but I was more aware of the sound of their pencil scratching across the paper, the way they leaned close enough for our elbows to touch. When their hand accidentally brushed mine, they didn't pull away immediately. I caught their eyes flicker toward me before returning to the page. That look stayed with me long after the project was finished. I began noticing the small ways we lingered around each other. If they were in the kitchen, I'd find a reason to pass through. If I was studying in my room, they'd knock, asking to borrow a pen they didn't need. Sometimes we'd stay up late, talking about everything from childhood memories to fears about the future. Those conversations felt different. They carried an intimacy that wasn't quite what siblings usually shared. The turning point came during a weekend trip to visit distant relatives. We were seated together on the bus, watching the scenery blur past the window. A fellow passenger, an older woman, smiled warmly and said, "You two make such a lovely couple." My twin chuckled, but didn't correct her. Instead, they gave me a sideways glance, one corner of their mouth lifting in a half-smile. I laughed too, though my heart was pounding. That moment wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a spark that neither of us chose to extinguish. After that, something unspoken settled between us. We became careful in public, but in private, we let the closeness grow. Our conversations carried longer pauses. Our silences became heavier, filled with things we weren't ready to say. I could feel the line between us shifting, and though part of me wanted to step back, another part was drawn toward it. One night, as we sat in my room scrolling through old photos, my twin leaned against me, their head resting lightly on my shoulder. I froze, then let them stay there. The warmth of their presence made the air feel charged, and I realized I didn't want the moment to end. It should have been nothing, just comfort. But when they finally sat up, their gaze lingered on mine, searching, almost asking. I didn't answer, because deep down I knew the answer was yes. I also knew that whatever came next would change us forever. It happened on a night when the world felt smaller, quieter. Rain pattered steadily against the windows, and the house was unusually still. Our parents were away for the weekend, leaving only the two of us in the warm glow of the living room lamp. We'd been talking for hours, curled into opposite ends of the couch. The conversation drifted between lighthearted jokes and heavier confessions, the kind you only share when you know the other person won't judge you. My twin spoke about fears of the future, about feeling misunderstood by everyone except me. I listened, but my heart was pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with the words. When they leaned forward, brushing an errant lock of hair from their forehead, my gaze caught on the details, how their eyes softened, how their hand lingered in midair before falling back into their lap. I felt something shift inside me, quiet but undeniable. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was full, heavy with all the unsaid things we'd carried for years. My hand moved before I could stop it, resting gently over theirs. Their fingers didn't pull away. Instead, they tightened slightly, as if afraid I might change my mind. I should have spoken, broken the moment with a joke, anything to push us back into safer territory. But the rain outside grew louder, the lamplight warmer, and in that cocoon of stillness, the rest of the world seemed irrelevant. We didn't need to say what we were both thinking. The truth was in the way we leaned closer, in the quiet hitch of breath, in the tremor of uncertainty that made the air between us feel electric. When our foreheads touched, it wasn't an accident, it was a decision. A step over a line we had tiptoed along for far too long. The moment itself was brief, but it felt infinite. My senses sharpened. The sound of the rain, the faint scent of their shampoo, the rhythmic thump of my own heartbeat. It was as if time had slowed just to mark the gravity of what we were doing. When we finally pulled back, the spell didn't break. We simply sat there, staring, both of us knowing that nothing could return to how it was before. I saw it in their eyes, a mixture of relief, fear, and something dangerously close to happiness. For a few minutes we stayed like that, wordless. And then, without warning, my twin rose from the couch, muttering something about needing water. I watched them leave the room, the sound of their footsteps fading down the hallway. I wanted to follow, to say something that would make sense of what had just happened. But I didn't move. I couldn't, because deep down, I knew sense had nothing to do with it. The day after, our home felt unfamiliar, as if the walls themselves had overheard what happened and decided to hold their breath. My twin moved through the rooms like a shadow, present, yet always just out of reach. At breakfast, the clink of a spoon against a mug was the loudest sound between us. I tried to meet their eyes, but they kept theirs fixed on the swirling tea. It struck me how quickly closeness could curdle into distance. One night we had been inseparable. Now we were careful strangers in the same space. The week that followed was a slow unraveling. In public, nothing seemed amiss. We still laughed in the right places, still finished each other's sentences when others were watching. But in private, we avoided moments that might remind us of the line we'd crossed. The couch where it happened became just another piece of furniture. The lamplight that once wrapped us in warmth now seemed too bright, too revealing. Then came the whispers. A neighbor had seen us that night through the rain-streaked window. They'd mentioned it to someone, who told someone else, and soon the air around us felt heavy with unspoken suspicion. I caught the flicker of knowing glances at the market, the way relatives' questions seemed to circle closer to something they wouldn't dare name. I tried to speak to my twin about it one evening. We were alone in the kitchen, the refrigerator humming softly. "We can't keep pretending this didn't happen," I said, my voice low. They didn't turn around. We have to, they replied. Because the alternative, we can't survive that. The words lodged in my chest. I wanted to argue, to promise that we could find a way to hold on to what we had. But the truth was already written in the way they stood, back straight, shoulders tight, every part of them braced against me. From then on, we became experts at polite distance. We shared spaces without touching, spoke without looking too long, laughed without letting it reach our eyes. And yet, no matter how far apart we pretended to be, the memory of that night pulsed quietly between us, impossible to forget. It was a betrayal in more ways than one, not just to the trust we'd built since birth, but to the idea that love, in any form, should bring people closer. I thought giving in to what I felt would bind us together forever. Instead, it had severed the very thread that once made us whole. Now, when I look at my twin, I don't see the other half of me. I see someone I used to know completely, and someone I may never truly know again. I said I finally did it. But in truth, all I did was trade the deepest connection of my life for a moment I can never take back.